Welcome to the Real Estate Sit Down, presented by Double B Homes. My name is Blair Berg, and I am joined by friend and colleague Nick Harris. Today we're talking about first-time home buying. For Nick's background, go ahead and check out the mental health episode. A lot of good nuggets in that one too, so go ahead, check that out. Thanks for coming back on, Nick.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
So, Nick, you work with a lot of first-time home buyers.
Yeah, yep, definitely. Yep.
So, just right off the bat, what are some mistakes that first-time home buyers make?
Oh, gosh. I would say one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen over the years of working with, a multitude of first-time home buyers is rushing the process. And I think I see that mainly in these first-time home buyers kind of thinking, okay, especially if they're coming from a lease that's about to be up. Mm-hmm. Their lease is up in a month. And then they're like, you know what, I'm going to buy a house. Or, I'm thinking of buying a house. My lease is up. I'm not renewing. And now they have like 5 weeks to find a house or something like that. So absolutely just like rushing the process, which creates just a snowball effect of panic and chaos.
Well, and just to add to that, I think it's funny that they're rushing the process because they weren't diligent about it in the beginning.
Right.
So it's like they are like, oh, I have 5 weeks left. Can you find me a house?
Right.
We should have had this conversation when you were like 3 months out from your lease.
Exactly.
It's like, have you talked to a lender yet?
Right.
Nope.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's all that stuff where it's, it's like if my advice to first time home buyers in that situation is if you're even considering it, if it's a thought, at that point, reach out to a lender, reach out to an agent and just say, hey, I'm very early stages. I'm having these thoughts of maybe buying a house instead of renewing my lease. What is the process? Because even if you're a full year out, it's better than, my lease is up in a month. Can I buy a house right now? And it's just, it'll be a lot less stressful for those first time buyers if they can lay out the full structure of the plan and hear exactly how it goes, do all this stuff with the lender up front and then wait rather than have to cram it all in.
Yeah, kind of to your point, I would say if you're in a lease and you're thinking that you're not going to renew on your lease,
Yep.
Just talk to a lender, figure out your financial situation.
Yeah.
Just because so many times, especially if it's like a close friend, you never want to harp the pre-approval thing. Like, I don't want to show you houses until you're pre-approved.
Right.
But they need that dose of reality too, though, because they're going to start looking in the 500s or something,
Mm-hmm.
fall in love with something, then we're like, okay, now we can go look at pre-approvals.
Right.
And then they're like, well, you're approved to 300.
For 300, 350.
And now they can't bring their taste back to 300.
Happens all the time. Yeah. And now they've fallen in love with this house. It's the perfect one. They want to go get it. And the lender comes back and says, sorry, here's what you're actually looking for. And then it's tough to knock down those expectations and reset expectations for here's actually what you're going to be able to afford right now.
Yeah.
And actually, I just had that happen with a client where they got pre-approved for they thought they could go for a certain amount, but then of course they didn't have all their ducks in a row. So when they got fully pre-approved, it was about 50 grand less. Which in this market, we all know 50 grand. If you get 50 grand knocked off and puts you down into, flat 300s, it could be pretty tough. But
well, yeah, and if you're approved at 350, you should probably set your search at 300.
Exactly. So if they're pre-approved for 300, they're looking at, 250, 275, and then you got to go up from there.
Exactly. And I do think, but it's easy for us to say the mistakes that they make because we work in the industry. To us, I think it seems like super common sense. Like, oh, well, you would start doing research then.
Right.
They don't even know. So many first-time homebuyers too. A lot of questions asked like, well, how long is this going to take?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And to that, I say, well, that depends.
Yep.
It depends how realistic your expectations are.
Right.
It depends on where we're looking.
Right.
And I never have a good one-size-fits-all answer for that.
Yeah, never.
Because I'm like, well, what do you mean? Once we get an offer accepted, it'll be generally 30 days.
Yeah, there's a couple answers to it. It's like a 2 or 3 part answer.
Are you talking about from when I set up your search?
Right.
Well, then now it depends. How picky are you going to be?
Yeah.
What area? Like I said, what areas you're looking at? Are you willing to go up and over list?
Mm-hmm.
Are you willing to, bend on some inspection terms, stuff like that?
Yep. Yeah. I see that a lot too, where it's like, okay, how long will this take? And it really depends on the buyer.
Yeah.
Are they going to understand that in this market right now, you might not be able to check all of your boxes? So you can get most of what you're looking for, but you probably won't get every single box checked with the house that you end up with. Which is, I think, another big mistake is buyers thinking that, I want every single thing and I want it picture perfect, which obviously you want to be happy. You don't want buyer's remorse, but you have to go into it with a mindset of, okay, I can probably get most of what I want, but I'm not going to get all of what I want. And then you have to be okay with that.
And I always come from a perspective of, I guess my number one rule that I always try to convey to buyers is set realistic expectations for yourself. Don't think of the dream home.
Right.
Unless you have like a parent buying your home and your dad is like a doctor or something,
Right.
your first home's not going to be your dream home.
Right.
It just isn't.
No.
So
Yeah.
my thing is, what I say to a lot of my first time home buyers, as we're doing the walkthrough, or if we want to walk back through it again after we look for it the first time, say, could you imagine doing your daily routine in this house?
Yeah, I like that. Yep.
Uninterrupted, would it work?
Yep.
Does it work for you to do your morning routine in this house and kind of map out your drive to work and your different commutes? Because if you can make it work for yourself for 2 to 5 years, it's about the equity you've built in your first house.
Yeah.
That's the stepping stone to any future home, the dream home down the line.
Yep.
Because like I said, it is, ask any homeowner.
Yep.
I can almost guarantee you 99% of them, the first home was not the dream home.
Right. Yeah. It usually doesn't go that way. And you definitely want to be comfortable. You want to enjoy where you live, but you also have to understand, like, yeah, this is probably not my dream home. This is not the forever home. Like you said, unless you've got a parent, and they've juiced up your price point a bit, or you hit the lotto and, you're going big. But for most people starting out, they're coming from a lease or a rental or something like that, or from living with their parents. And that first one just needs to be something that you can call your own, be comfortable, enjoy, and appreciate. And then also, like you said, just hold on to it and sit on it to build that equity so that you can do that, become a move-up buyer. I've got some first-time clients right now that we helped buy houses. Now I know this market's been wild, but just 2 years ago, and they're already sitting on 70, 80,000 of equity or more. So it's like that's the name of the game right there. Just get in, be comfortable, and then let that equity grow.
Yeah, and for anyone watching too, we are talking about the Minnesota market. So where you're at, maybe if you're on the West Coast or something, it's a little bit different.
Right.
You can see the pricing change as it goes from west to east. The Midwest is still, I think, a market on the rise. I mean, we had interest rates touch 7% yesterday, and I mean, we're still out here in multiples.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So you would think it's really baffling to some of us agents and probably to buyers too, where it's like, we're touching 7, hovering around 6.5, depending on credit, depending on if there's any rate buy down, stuff like that. And yet you still have people, multiple offers, bidding over, so it's a game out there for sure.
Well, and that's why I think it's very important. Like I said, I think there are so many things that we find common sense in the average person doesn't, because it's not their job. I mean, last year I had so many buyers say, I'm going to wait. I don't want it. It's too competitive. There's too many multiple offer scenarios because the interest rates are down at 2.5, 2.7.
Right.
So they took the year off, but now prices are higher.
Yeah.
Interest rates are higher. And it's still going into multiples. It might not be 30, 50 multiples,
right?
But you're still fighting off like 10 other offers. Yeah. So now where did they get you? Now your dollar is worth less and the prices are higher.
Yeah.
So that's where, and that's another thing is for first-time home buyers that are on the edge of, can I, should I?
Right.
I say if you can, you should.
Yeah.
Now, by no means am I saying stretch yourself too thin. What I'm saying is if you've talked to a lender or your financial guy or whoever helps you out with your financial decisions and a monthly payment on a house fits into your schedule, that's when's the right time.
Right.
Don't wait for an arbitrary news update that says interest rates came down.
Yeah.
A deal at the current interest rate is a deal whenever.
Right.
So
Right.
if a monthly payment fits in your budget at 7%, buy it now,
Right.
because if you wait, the price is going to go up. And
Exactly.
if a year from now the interest rate goes down, you can refinance.
Yeah.
And now it more than fits in your monthly budget because it's fixed.
Right. Just like how people, I mean, it's so cliche, so corny, but where they say marry the house, date the rate.
Mm-hmm.
It's I don't like to say it because it is it's corny. It's a corny saying, but it's so true. It's, you know, I had a guy in 2018 who my dad told me, wait, prices are coming down. Prices are coming down. Just wait, just wait.
What's your dad do?
He's still waiting. I have no clue what dad does, but dad made sure that he didn't buy a house. And he's still waiting. He has not bought a house yet. And I guarantee you the houses that we had started looking at, they're all a good maybe $100K higher now.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because, and I never want to sound snarky when I ask that question, but when I have a first-time home buyer tell me, well, this person told me it's not a great time to buy.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what do they do?
Right.
It's like, well, my dad's a plumber.
Mm-hmm.
My dad, works in an office in a different state.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, then they probably don't know the current market as well. That's why I always say, and I'm sure throughout this entire show, it's going to come back to talk to a lender as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
Talk to a lender.
Absolutely.
They know the local programs to help you with your down payment. They know how you get the best interest rate. They can look at your credit score, your DTI, and kind of determine what you can afford. Don't ask your cousin's neighbor's pen pal from California if now's the right time to buy.
Yeah. I 1000% agree with that because it's very situational for every buyer. You know, some people do you have to move? Is it beneficial for you to move? Can you find something that you'll be happy with that's not going to stretch your budget, break the bank, anything like that? It's really situational. Talk to your lender, see what that monthly payment would be and what that price range equals out to, and then see if you can find something in that range. But I agree, and we never want to be snarky, and that's not our goal. But definitely don't. If you're hearing the headlines, there's a lot of conflicting headlines. The news, they're also not in that industry.
Yep.
They're just hearing what they're hearing, and then they're writing articles about it, putting out headlines. That's their goal, is to get you to read the article, get you to tune in. Definitely speak to a professional. I wouldn't give dentist advice or teeth advice to somebody, because I don't know. I might think I know, but I just don't know.
Well, and to your point too, fear sells.
Right.
That's why anytime an interest rate bumps up, the housing market is crashing.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what they'll tell you on the news, or you'll see on social media from the big news outlets.
Yeah.
Keep it local.
Yeah.
I think real estate is one thing,
1000%.
like make sure you're looking local.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you'll find your best information. And then it's funny too, like you said, yeah, I don't get legal advice from the guy who cuts my hair.
Right.
So
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
if you want real estate advice, talk to a real estate professional. And by no means am I sitting here lobbying my services saying, oh, you have to come to me.
Yeah.
Talk to somebody.
Anybody,
I mean, you can
yeah.
definitely talk to me if you'd like, but
Right.
talk to any real estate professional you're comfortable with, because hopefully if they're, they have ethics, they'll set you straight.
Right.
I mean, I have plenty of people in my life, they kind of describe their situation to me, and I will probably, I'll set them straight whether they should or they shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
But my biggest thing too, and I think, and you might be different on this, so I'd be curious to get your opinion, but I really don't give any sort of lending advice or knowledge. Anything I tell my clients, I preface it with, this is just my educated guess based on what I have seen.
Yep.
Talk to your lender. And and that's where I think my lender and I are a really good tag team, because I can direct all my clients to him for questions.
Yeah.
And because it goes back to, like I said, I don't go to the guy who cuts my hair for legal advice.
Right.
So I'm not the numbers guy.
Yeah.
I can give you anecdotal evidence, but my expertise is showing you houses, helping you negotiate, pointing out, okay, this might be an expensive item to replace. This is a little less expensive, so don't worry about that. You know, I'm the expert on houses and negotiating. When it comes to the finance part, I don't want to spread myself too thin because I believe if you're a jack of all trades, you're a master of none.
Yeah. Exactly.
So if I spend too much of my time trying to learn the lending side and then all the other stuff, I won't be doing my job as well.
Right.
So it comes down to like leveraging your skill set. So if that's not my skill set, I leverage it out to my lending partner who I work very closely with, and we can figure out your situation. So that's another thing too. I have a lot of people in my life that come to me and say, hey, this is my credit score. What do you think my interest rate would be? I was like, I'm not even going to touch that.
Yeah.
Talk to my guy because I don't want to give you any information that isn't accurate. And so the only reason I go down that rant is just because talk to your real estate agent buddy, but also get a lender involved.
Yeah, 1,000%. And I'm pretty much the same way. It's like I view it as a tag team duo with the lender and myself, where I like to think I'm obviously going to stay educated to an extent about mortgages, financing, interest rates, where everything is. It's obviously our job to know. You know, we're not going to be clueless about interest rates and where they're at for that, any given time. But it's definitely when it gets into the deep stuff. So I know enough to be dangerous, right? To be able to give an answer and also to be able to tell a client, that's not information that I know. And I don't want to give you any incorrect information, but then set up and bring in the lender that I like to work with or their lender. And then it's just a tag team duo where they can get that information. And then when they have a question for the lender, that lender then in return does the same thing and says, oh, you're going to want to chat with Nick about that because that's his area. And so we kind of go back and forth so they get all areas covered as professionally and as thorough as possible and not have to worry about anything falling through the cracks. If I gave some information that's incorrect, I mean, that could be disastrous for them, or they could make a decision based on what I said. And if I don't fully 100% know what I'm talking about, I'm not doing them, and I'm doing them a disservice, right? So I'm not looking out for their best interest and just trying to guess or I'll find out. I want to sit and talk and tag team and be a team around them, build this team around them for this whole process so that they feel fully encompassed in all the information they need, all the answers they need. So
yeah, and I do think because I get the impression sometimes first-time homebuyers think you're kind of passing the buck. You're like, you know what, let me redirect it to my financing guy. But really it's so that I can do the best job for you and give you the most accurate information possible.
Exactly. Yep.
But I also think that brings me to kind of my next mistake per se that a first-time homebuyer might make, followed with a tip, is they get one pre-approval from a big box brand, and then we get through the process, and when we get to the closing table, we couldn't get a hold of anybody, and now something's not right.
Yeah.
So I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. I mean, I'm sure a lot of great deals get done with Spaceship Mortgage, but I do say even if you get that online pre-approval, that's great, but shop it a little bit.
Yeah.
I always say credit unions are great. Check with a local human being because a lot of times they'll say, hey, we got this rate, this fee, yada, yada, yada. But if you take that and you talk to a lender that, has good customer service, a lot of the times they're like, oh, well, their interest rate is this because you're buying down this. And you'll find out a lot of their products are the same.
Yeah.
It just depends on, trading this fee for that percent and something like that. So I say get a couple, but pick the one that has the best customer service that you can get a hold of on a Saturday.
That's big.
On a weeknight, because you do not want to be at the closing table and you can't get a hold of anybody. No. So a lot of times that local guy, you give them the rates. They'll be like, oh, well, yeah, because you're paying more here, but we can get you that rate, but you also have to pay this. So they can show you how that's happening and they can usually match. But that's what I'd say is if you're like insisting on using the big guy,
Yeah.
beware.
Yeah,
But all I'm saying is it doesn't hurt to get a second opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only, and to speak on the whole thing about someone who's local or reachable, even, if you can, the best transactions, the best deals that I've been a part of, where, especially with first time home buyers, because there's going to be a lot of questions. And a lot of the time I don't like to call it hand holding, but a lot of the time they're not sure what's going on, what to do, and they need a lot of information. And so if they can't get a hold of somebody, or they're calling a corporate number and they have to go through a bunch of prompts or something like that, it gets frustrating. And I've seen it for the first time home buyers or any clients that I've worked with where they're buying a home and they were able to pick up their cell phone and call their lender on their lender's cell phone. It goes so much more smoothly because they can actually just reach out to that person who they've already built this rapport with and get the answer right there. And not only just at the closing table can there be a problem, but in this market, it moves very fast. And if you walk into a showing and that's the one, and it's a Friday and there's shoes at the door because there's 20 showings that day, or there's an open house, that house is going that weekend.
Yeah.
And you need that pre-approval letter. That's the other thing, is you need the pre-approval letter to get your offer even considered, to get it accepted, and then to move forward. So if you can't hop on the phone and say, hey, we found the one, I need my pre-approval letter, can you send that to me? And you have to wait, you can't get hold of them or whatnot. So yeah, absolutely. It's huge. And it just goes a lot more smoothly if you can reach out to that person directly and get what you need right off the bat.
Well, anyone involved being able to get a hold of them is good.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. Yep.
You want your agent to be able to get a hold of them. You want
Exactly.
the title company to be able to get a hold of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think too, it's funny that I would even say if you haven't bought a home in the last 10 years, I would say consider yourself a first-time home buyer.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Because that's another thing too, is I have a lot of first-time home buyers will be looking at a house, they'll bring their dad, and the dad will say, well, we're not paying over. We're going to offer 10 less than what they're asking. I'm like, well, they told me they already have an offer in hand.
Yeah.
They're going to call for highest and best on Sunday. And the dad will go, oh, what's highest and best? In my day, we didn't do that.
Yeah.
I would make them an offer, they would counter it, and then we get it done for less than they listed it.
Yeah.
So, and that's not to, bash anybody. That's just the fact that the market has
just how
changed.
it was when they were buying, that's how it was.
Yeah. So consider yourself a first-time home buyer, and that's, again, why I say talk to an expert. Because while your dad has good intentions and good meanings, it's just I'm not telling you something that every other agent in the market wouldn't tell you, that this house is going to go over the weekend. It's going to go in multiples.
Right.
You don't have a month to think on it. You're not going to meet the seller, shake their hand, and come up with a deal.
And they're not going to counter. It's not likely. They can.
They can.
But it's not likely.
And I think, too, it really depends on how the negotiation goes. But if you've got a home in the, the right, like the metro area, and you've priced it correctly, for people that ask me how quickly does stuff move, I say, we usually go coming soon, Wednesday or Thursday. We go live on Friday. We set highest and best for Sunday night.
Yeah. Exactly.
Or Monday morning.
Exactly.
It's usually not going to last the weekend.
Yeah.
Again, more rural areas, higher price points. It's a different story. But if you're right there in the mid range, the 3 to 5,
it can differ.
I wouldn't wait.
Yeah, especially and it just plays into your point of it's local. So it depends on where you are. Depends on the type of home, your market, your micro market. And the condition of the home too. But yeah, that's a huge thing. I just want to go back to your point about talking to a professional, because one of the other mistakes that I see, and one of my pieces of advice for first-time home buyers is go in with an open mind, and what your agent is telling you about the market, take heed to that. Take that to heart. If the agent is saying, we need to be ready when we walk into that house and you decide that that's the one, it's not going to be, we don't really have 24 hours sometimes. Right now it depends, but you're not going to have like a week to think on it. It's going to have to be, if you walk into it and you love it and that's the one, we're going to have to go. And then you usually get one shot at it. That's, I have heard, it's funny that you say that because it's not a hypothetical at all. I've had parents go in and say, well, in my day, you know.
Oh, I have too, yeah.
And it's real. It's a real deal. And it's like, well, that was 15, 20, 25 plus years ago. And there's not going to be any negotiation. If they call for highest and best or there's any other offers on the table, you usually have a one shot. And I've had clients that are like, really, like they're not going to counter my offer or, you know, come back and ask me if I'll. No, you have one shot. So you have to lead with your best foot forward. I'll literally tell my clients, whatever your highest amount is that you would pay for this home, and you wouldn't go $1 over, I want you to think of that price. And if that's something that you're willing to pay for this home, let's go for it. But we're going to get we got to put our best foot forward first, because we're not going to get a second chance, most likely.
No, totally agreed. And like I said, sometimes they'll counter with you if you're first or second and you've got good terms, so they want you, can you come up on price a little bit? But yeah, usually it's now or never.
It's one and done.
Yeah, I mean, I think very early in my career, I actually had a client that I broke up with after a couple showings where the dad just wouldn't budge. And I kind of told him too, I just said, hey, I totally respect you guys and I understand what's going on here. And I can see the frustration that you're having, but if your dad's going to be involved and he's really not going to bend on these terms, I don't think it would do me any good to keep showing you houses.
Yeah,
and the last time I checked, I don't think he ever ended up getting anything. They did get another agent, but I don't think they ever ended up getting anything.
That one's tough. Yeah.
And I think it was tough because when I would have any one-on-one time with the client, I could tell he was frustrated with his dad, but his dad really was not going to let anything happen unless it was his way.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's tough. So I totally can sympathize with first-time homebuyers in that direction.
Situation. Yeah. That's a whole situation. I've seen something like that, but on the other side. So that's another piece of advice that I would say for first-time homeowners is, and it's tough because it's your parents, and you love your parents. And it would be a struggle for me in the same situation. But on this, I've seen this happen. I've had this happen to clients in multiple situations where they love the house. Loved the house. We get the house. We're doing inspection and whatnot, and then parents show up either at the inspection, the final walkthrough or something like that, or we're about to close.
Now we want to negotiate.
And now we want to negotiate because we've got a parent walking through and kind of nitpicking things and or saying, "Oh, are you sure you want to pay this for this house?" And it's tough because I've watched clients' morale of a house that they loved just kind of get beat down to where they're second guessing themselves just because a parent didn't like the house themselves. Yeah. So now we're talking battle of personal preference, or something like that, or are you sure you didn't pay too much for this? And it's like that's the market. It's like, if we're not gonna, as agents, that's another thing is you got to trust us. We're not going to let you overpay. Like I'll tell my clients, I think, if you go this high, you should be fine. If you go this high, we're going to let you know, we're going to walk you through that pricing, and let you know the scenario. But if you get in there and your parents are walking through and kind of derailing it, that's pretty tough. And I get it because it's your parents. You don't want to tell them no. But if they don't have any money going into it, you got to stick with your gut.
Well, and sadly, a lot of the times, parents are probably helping a little bit financially. Yeah. So then you feel more obligated. Yeah. And sometimes they're like, I'm not even going to fund this. I'm not going to give you that gift money for whatever amount. But
then it's like you're stuck. But
yeah, and it's funny too, going back to one of your comments about not allowing a client to overpay. I always say this, and again, I wouldn't say I don't allow people to do anything, because my closing argument I always say is I cannot put a price tag on how much you love this home. I will say absolutely. I will give my best educated advice on where I'm seeing the price.
Yep.
I mean, just last week we went under contract on a house, and the comps I was seeing were, a little above ask. I could support it a little above, and I think it was priced a little high. But I think I shouldn't say that. I think it was priced fairly, and I could see based on the comps it going a little over ask, but not a ton.
Yeah.
But good friend of mine. I know that he can be kind of over analytical, so I really wanted to get him a clean deal, to save him some continued stress, because I know this guy would not be somebody who is gonna go very long in multiple situations, just because I think that'd really eat him up. So I was talking to the agent, I'm like, what would get this done tonight? Close it down. I know you got an offer in hand already. What do we got to do? He came back, gave us a number that I thought was out of the ballpark.
Yeah.
And but I felt comfortable asking what would shut this down, because he gave the indication his sellers were motivated to get it sold and get it done.
Yeah.
So he said they wanted this, and then they wanted X amount of appraisal gap guarantee. And advising my client, I said, hey, this is a number they came back with. They want an appraisal gap guarantee, which, getting into that stuff, make sure you're explaining to your client exactly what that means, because a lot of first-time home buyers are like, what is an appraisal?
What is that? Yeah.
I don't even know what that is, not to mention appraisal gap guarantee. So I came back to him and I just said, hey, this is the number they gave, appraisal gap guarantee. And I just said, I would not feel comfortable telling you. I don't deal with a lot of low appraisals. We just don't, because houses are appraising right now.
Yeah.
But I just said, I wouldn't feel comfortable saying, I think it's going to appraise at this. I wouldn't worry about it. I was like, my comps aren't showing that number.
Yeah.
So I would be worried about locking you into this.
Yeah.
And so, but then I ended it. But for you, if you love this home enough and you want it today, it would get it done. And we held our ground. A couple hours later, they came back lower. We didn't do appraisal gap guarantee. We still got it. Okay, and we shut it down.
Yeah.
Before, and this was on a Friday, so we got it before all the weekend showings, which was good. So, like I said, trust your realtor. And I mean, like, again, I think we get, and we talked about this last time, I think we get a bad rap, and people think that we're just like, we're used car salesmen. But in that situation, like I said, I was like, I wouldn't do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you would, that's perfectly fine. But I'm just telling you, I wouldn't do that.
And that's exactly what I mean too. Yeah. Like I'm going to tell you, like, straight up, or sometimes it's the reverse. And people, like you said, they'll think, oh, you're just trying to pad. You're like, no, if you want this house, I'm telling you what you're going to need to do to get it. And it might seem it might seem a little bit extensive to some folks who maybe it's their first time, or it's their first time at that stage of actually writing offers. And they're like, really, we're going to have to go, 20, 30 grand. And that's just the market right now for some areas here in Minnesota, and for some price points. But yeah, absolutely. If I'm going to tell you, here's what I recommend or whatever, but you cannot put a price on. If someone's got $1 million in cash and they love a home that's valued at $500,000 and they want to give $1 million just to get that, it's worth $1 million. It's worth it to them, So we see it in everything: art, cars, everything. Like, there's people who would pay X amount for some, a chicken nugget that looks like Jesus Christ or something,
Yeah, exactly.
And some people think it's worth that, whatever, but and some don't. So, yeah.
Well, and that's why I always say, and I even end it with too, after that, I say, I can't put a price on how much you love the home. And I go, but I say all this to tell you, I would not want you to, a month after close, say, God, what the hell, Blair? We paid $50,000 over ask because you said that was a good idea. And that's why I always say, like, hey, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm, like, the market supports. And that's why I put the decision in your hands, because it is your house and your money.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And for all the real estate agent haters out there, it's a commission-based thing, and that is a direct story we're telling about. I didn't push him up and over to get a higher commission.
Yeah.
I wanted to keep him practical. So, it's not, because you got to build a good reputation.
On top of that, I want to just, and it's a little off subject a little bit, but on top of that, we as agents and realtors, a lot of people don't understand that we have fiduciary duty and that we are, legally bound to keep their interests first and foremost, above anything else.
Yep.
So for any agent who's out there, trying to pump numbers for, like, it's illegal. Like, you can get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people don't understand that we are bound by these rules, regulations, these laws that prevent us from, and it's just not to just blanket all agents and say, well, you're just trying to get a bigger commission. And it's like, no, if you want this house, I'm just telling you what you need to do to get this house. I, on top of not being immoral, am bound and am not going to do anything to jeopardize my career, my livelihood, my family's a source of income for my family, et cetera, nor am I going to jeopardize your money either. It's people's one of their biggest purchases that they'll ever make. So.
Yeah. And I think my business is literally only as good as my reputation. It's a service. It's a service industry. So, I mean, if someone gives me a glowingly negative review on my Google business page, future clients will look that up and they'll be like, I don't want to work with that guy. So on top of all the moral reasons, the actual legal, like the legal obligation I have, but it's on top of that, it's like, so there are so many layers to it. It's like, well, obviously I'm going to try to do the best job possible.
A little off top, but yeah.
No, that's great. But I do think, so coming down to negotiating stuff too, a hot topic is definitely inspections. And I think for first-time home buyers too, because they don't really even know what all that entails.
Yes,
so I think a lot of times right now you think the only way to win is to drop your inspection. Mm-hmm. But I tell all my clients, I'm like, hey, it will strengthen your offer if you drop your inspection. But I never outright recommend that. No. I was like, if you're comfortable with it and you really want this house and it looks like a clean house, you can, and it'll make your offer stronger. By no means am I saying you have to do it.
Yeah.
And I got to say, the last two, and it might be more, but I just know off the top of my head, the last two houses I put under contract on the buy side, we were in multiples and both of them had inspections and we got it. And I know that the other one, and some of them didn't, that we were competing against.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I will educate them on, maybe we put in terms, hey, we're only looking for safety or hazardous items.
Exactly. Yep.
Or repairs up to X amount.
A certain amount. Yeah. Yeah. It's, I will never, I literally stand there as we're at that stage, literally stand there, or even up front, and when we were first beginning to talk about the process, and I'm going through the steps and I'm letting them know, okay, when we get to inspection, here's what the market looks like. So obviously I'm giving them the overview of the market, what they're going to see when we get out there and they find a house they want. And when it comes to inspections, I will look them in the face and I'll say, I will never recommend foregoing the inspection, but I will tell you that it can strengthen your offer. And if you feel okay with that, you can let me know that you want to do that, but I'm never going to recommend it. Because there's a lot of horror stories out there. And of course, some homes are well taken care of and it might not necessarily need it, or it's been pre-inspected by the sellers. And so I will let my clients know, like, hey, this has been pre-inspected by the sellers when they went to list it. Here's the inspection report. Look over it. And if you're comfortable with that, if you're comfortable with everything that it says, then by all means, you can skip it. And it's going to strengthen your offer, obviously, but it's not always necessary. And I just, out of wanting the best for my clients, I'm not going to recommend it. But there are different strategies around that. Like you said, like you could strengthen your offer by still having it in there, but stating this is only for our educational purposes. Our offer is not contingent on this inspection. It's just for our educational purposes, so we know what we're looking at when we buy this house. Or you could say we're only gonna, if anything that we find in this inspection is under X amounts, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 to fix. If it's under that amount, we're fine. We're
Mm-hmm.
good. We'll handle it ourselves. That way you can protect your first time home buyers and your clients and say, now if it's something massive, like, oh, we found out that the furnace has got 3 hours left before that sucker goes, you're
Or
not
the foundation's
walking, or the
bowing,
foundation's
yeah.
bowing or something. You're not signing on the dotted line and then you show up and your furnace doesn't work, or the basement's flooded, or
Mm-hmm.
the foundation is about to go or something like that. Yeah. It's to protect them. But there's ways around getting it in there and still getting your offer accepted in this competitive market. Or you could just completely forgo it if you want to. But
Yep. Yeah, and I think so. On top of that, I think that another big thing to touch on is your cash to close.
yeah,
A lot of first-time home buyers don't understand the fees that go into it. They get
right.
like, oh, okay, my down payment would be this.
Mm-hmm.
But for cash to close, you should be kind of budgeting 2 to 5% of your purchase price.
Yep.
And I mean, that includes appraisal fees, title insurance, application fees, origination fees, government taxes. I mean, a lot of it's Uncle Sam at the end. But I think, and this is another thing when I was talking with my lender when he was on, when it comes to application fees, yes, you don't pay anything up front. Only the lender you choose to go with, it comes out of the sale of the home. So it's that. But that's
Except
another thing
for the
is
inspection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Inspection you'll pay up front. Be planning around like 400, 600 on that, depending on what all inspections you do. But I think a lot of times people don't plan on that, and then they get into it, and then they get their
and it's like, whoa,
closing disclosures, and like, what am I looking at?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's why I think it's important. Make sure you have a lender that really explains that to you.
And that goes back to the tag team, right? Like with the lender and the tag team duo, understanding. And I'll frequently, even when it's like, when it comes up to a house that I have a client, they like the house, I always say, okay, bring this to your lender. And the lender will tell them, anytime you find the house, send me so I can run the numbers. But I'll, let them know, bring it to your lender and get that number and see exactly what you'd be looking at. And if you're good with that, and I'll tell them too, like, here's probably what it's going to take to lock this house down. Like, let's say, just for example, it's listed for $350, but it's got multiple offers. So we're looking at, let's just call it $375 for number's sake, for example's sake. I will let them know, okay, take this house to your lender, tell them that you want to know what the payment will look like at $375. Make sure that's okay. And then also ask them, what am I looking at all in? What am I going to be looking at the end here?
Yeah.
And they'll usually be able to give you a pretty close estimate within a fairly small margin of error of what you'd be looking at closing, what check you're going to have to write, of course. But yeah, I think that's another huge mistake is first-time homeowners might go into the whole situation and not understand the different parts or where the money's coming from, where the money's going, and at each stage and at which stage. You've got your earnest money, and this comes down to your realtor educating you at the beginning, which is why all the way to our first point of do this early as possible so and your agent, your realtor should be breaking it down. Here, you're going to need to do your earnest money at the time of your offer or accepted offer.
Yep.
And then you got your inspection. And then you're going to want to know what your closing cost is. And if it's all at once and it's in the throes of you getting that deal accepted or getting your offer accepted, it's going to feel like a lot and it's going to be overwhelming. So you want to know all that up front. And that's another mistake that I see people kind of falling into is not knowing. And they're like, wait, what is the earnest money? Wait, I thought that everything's paid at the end. What do you mean I have to pay the inspection?
Yeah.
I thought that, and it just becomes a disaster. So talk to your lender. Agents should be doing their job up front. Your lender's doing their job, letting you know. But always ask, what am I looking at on the back end at closing? Give me that estimate so there's no sticker shock.
Yeah.
When you're a week out from closing, you're like, wait a second, I have to pay how much, and so.
Yeah, no, and all that was great too. So just to kind of wrap things up, bullet point style, what are your biggest tips for first-time home buyers? Just, I mean, even summarize what we just talked about.
Yeah, I think
Like pick your top 3 tips for first-time home buyers.
Number 1, speak to your agent and lender early and often, I would say. No question is a dumb question. Sit down, go out, grab some coffee, and just have a conversation. That's what I tell all of my first-time homeowners or first-time home buyers. Let's sit down first before we get excited and get out looking at stuff, so we can go over the process. And I tell them, your homework, the only thing I need you to do is bring every question you can think of, and we're going to hammer it out then. You don't have to remember all the answers, but at least let's start to cover it. And then I'll just, along the way, I'll keep you updated and answer questions. Another one, listen to your agent and ask the agent and take, heed their advice, take it to heart what they tell you the market's like. If they're telling you here's what you're going to be looking at for your price point, you're going to want to know that and go into each showing, each house, knowing like, okay, if I want this, I'm going to have to be serious about it.
Yep.
So that a second piece of that is don't start this process until you're ready. If you're not ready, don't waste your time. Don't waste your agent's time. Don't waste homeowners' time.
Yeah.
Because when you schedule that showing and they're still living there, they got to hightail it out of there so you can walk through their house.
Yep.
So if you're not ready, if you're not willing to put in a serious offer, shouldn't be seeing houses, which rolls me into my third, probably final one that I see happening quite often is don't go see a house if it's a maybe.
Yeah.
If there's 2 of you, like you and a spouse or partner, whatever, friend, and somebody's not on board, don't go.
Yeah.
You're like I said, you're going to waste your time. You're probably going to argue about it with your partner, your spouse, whatever. You're wasting the homeowner's time and you're wasting your agent's time.
Yeah.
And it's a lose-lose for everybody involved. So only be seeing houses. Your agent should have you set up on a search. I know you're looking through Zillow online. If it's a maybe, it's a no.
Yeah.
Unless that house looks like, yeah, this one definitely could be the one. And photographers are good at their jobs, so I get it. It might look great. It's a different story when you get in the house and you're like, wow, they covered that up. They didn't show me this. I didn't know about this. That's a different story. But if you're looking at it, you're like, maybe. No, don't waste your time.
And just to piggyback off that, I'll say, fellas, if your wife or girlfriend doesn't like the house, just don't even look at it.
Yeah,
and that's just to say, it's like,
it's funny, but don't bother.
have seen it, and I think 100% of the times, if your wife doesn't like it, you're not buying it.
Yeah.
So, and then just, I mean, to close with some of my tips for first-time home buyers, I'd say, forget the dream house. That's my biggest one. Forget the dream house. Your first one's not going to be the dream house. Again, make sure you can do your daily routine in it. And that you could live there for 2 to 5 years without pulling your hair out, because that's what you should be looking for. That house is to build equity as a stepping stone towards the dream house. If you're a first-time home buyer and you wait until your financial situation is ready for the dream house is going to keep moving out of your reach because your dollar's worth less. The prices have gone up.
Yep.
So just be prepared for that. And like Nick said too, be willing to listen to the professionals when they give you advice on just the market in general. And then another big one too, I always say, if you walk into a house and you absolutely love it, but you're like, I don't like the color of the walls, or I don't like the carpet. Those are the two things I always tell my first-time home buyers. If you absolutely love a house, but the carpet or the paint is like a breaking point for you, don't let that be the breaking point, because those are probably the 2 cheapest things you can do to the house to get it ready for you. So,
and to piggyback off that, another one on that, on the flip side, if you're standing there having to talk yourself into it, it's not the one. It's not the one.
Yep. In the way that I show houses, and like I said, I was working with a really close, lifelong friend of mine last week, and he's a first-time home buyer, and we're looking, and I said, hey, the way I show houses is I walk you through and I point out everything. Most of it's going to be negative.
Yeah.
I'm going to point out all the negatives. So then when we leave the house, if you still love it, you really loved it.
Yeah.
Because I told you all the things that could possibly be wrong with it.
Right.
All the things that are going to cost you money down the line.
Mm-hmm.
My job, I think, when I'm on showings is kind of play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
You love the house so much. What about this?
Yeah.
What about that? Do you still love it?
Yep.
Because it's just like anything in your life. You got to, if you want it to be part of your life, you got to love the flaws too.
Yeah, exactly. And if you can overlook that stuff and you're like, oh, that's fine. And, oh, I can take care of that and I can live with that. Perfect. Great. Now we're looking at the one. But if you're standing, and I just this past weekend, I had some clients that were like, well, we could, and I guess it's not that bad. And that's great. We don't want to nitpick to the point of just being overly picky. But if it's something big and it's like, and we're not checking any boxes, we're stretching to like it, it's not the one. The most surefire way to buyer's remorse and hating where you live is to try to gloss over all that stuff, because when you close and then you start close on that house, you start moving in and you're there for a month, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. That stuff's going to creep up on you and you're going to notice it every day and you're going to hate your house and you're going to have total buyer's remorse. So yeah, including neighbors. That's the last one I'll leave you with is you only get to choose your neighbors once. So look at the house, look at the exterior, and drive around the neighborhood before or after the showing. You only get to choose your neighbors once.
Well, I was going to say, just to flesh that out too, with my last comment will be not only your neighbors, but the location of your home is the one thing you can't change. Yeah. So I've had people that like, can we go look at this house? I really don't like the area, but the house looks really nice.
It's a wrap.
No. Because if you wouldn't feel comfortable going around the neighborhood, living there every day, no.
It's too far from work, or, you're stretching it, or you told me you wanted to be here, but now this is way over here. No. Like if it's something that just doesn't fit, don't try to stretch it.
Exactly. All right. Well, hopefully this has been helpful for all the first-time home buyers out there. Thanks for coming back on, Nick. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Awesome.